Hey, Lead Up Podcast listeners, Mike Harbour, another great episode on the Lead Up Podcast. I'm interviewing my new friend, Mike Peterson, today. Mike is the author of a book called Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption. We were talking a little bit in our green room before we jumped on. I'm excited to share him with you today to learn some things about his experience in the HR and IT space and how to merge those two together and lead your team to a level of high performance, which we talk a lot about here on the Lead Up Podcast. Mike, welcome to the show. How are you today, my friend?
Thank you so much, Mike. Such a pleasure to be here. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, doing fantastic. Excited. I love, what was interesting, Mike, is I really didn't know you until today. I get all kinds of requests for people to interview on my show. I'm kind of picky about who I let on because I only do, 20, 24, 26 interviews a year. But I was intrigued by the information I got about your book. I saw it because of everything's going on with technology today and
hmm
AI, which I have a huge interest in learning how to use AI more and what that means for our workforce. But then as I was getting ready for the show today, I noticed you live in Arkansas just like I do, which is what a small world, man, because I interview people from all over the world. Tell the listeners a little bit about you, your company, and really what you specialize in and do.
yeah, thanks, Mike. So I am the founder of Apex Consulting Partners, and we are a consulting firm focused on helping high-performing leaders build high-performing teams. And what's unique about us is our ability to really blend traditional leadership approaches with IT capabilities. So in my almost 2 decades of experience, I've been in some unusual roles, being the head of IT and HR at two separate public companies. And so we bring that experience to our consulting practice and really focus on how companies can be high performing in this age of digital disruption that AI has brought to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that interesting. I don't often talk with people who have both HR, which is emotions, and IT, which is X's and O's, right? Or ones and zeros. I mean, ones and zeros. You got the IT background. How did you kind of land yourself in and merge those two within your own leadership philosophy?
Yeah, it's very unusual. And I think it's safe to say that HR people have kind of earned themselves a reputation of being tech illiterate. So I get a lot of people that are surprised by that combination. During my college years, I worked at Best Buy in the Geek Squad. So I had the short sleeve dress shirt and the clip-on tie, and did computer repair, and have always been a tech geek, being on bleeding edge, kind of smart home technology and personal technology. And I owe really technology a lot in relations to my accelerated career within HR. So a lot of my roles are really focused on how can we bring technology to modernize what we do in the HR space. And the leadership team at one of my companies said, this is really cool what you're doing in the HR space. Can you do this for the rest of us? And they asked me to take over responsibility for IT, and the more I dug my hands into it, the more I realized there's a lot of overlap and similarity between the two functions, and it's really about supporting the organization and making sure that people have the tools and resources that they need to be successful.
So we're going to get into your book, Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption. I want to learn more from you in that regard. But talk to me just a minute about how do companies use technology while also maintaining that human touch that's so important from a human resource perspective?
Yeah, and at least as of now, humans are a really important factor in the equation, right? It might be different 20 years from now when AI has advanced considerably, but as of now, humans are really the most important factor in what we do, and so it's really important that as we companies embrace technology, that um, we're not having technology kind of be a tool that sits on the sideline, or a shiny object that's kind of optional, that we pick up every now and then. It's really important that we lead through technology, and we really embed that into the culture of the organization, because technology is growing in importance very, very quickly, especially in hybrid global organizations, where some people might be in the office and some people might be working from the other side of the world.
Yeah, so important. And look, I love technology until it doesn't work for me, right? I mean, you and I are we're about 4 hours apart driving time, but we're using technology to talk with each other, which, I love. I love the ability to do that. And my business is much like yours. We work with companies from a consulting standpoint, helping develop leaders and talent retention, those kinds of things. And, back during COVID, everybody had to get smart on technology, right? At least from a
Yeah.
Zoom technology perspective. And luckily for me, I had started using technology in my business well before COVID. I had started doing, virtual training and virtual communication through Zoom. And so, my business really didn't miss a lick. It actually picked up because I had the tools and the equipment to really go out and do it
That's
already.
great.
But where do you find in the companies you work with, what do you find as the gap between that human resource and interweaving technology to help companies perform better?
Yeah, I get this question all the time, and I think um, you know, so many organizations uh, will have the idea to implement a piece of technology, and they might say, the team might say, well, hey, we've implemented Slack for you. It's ready to go. Go have at it. Or, we've implemented a new payroll software. Go ahead. But they miss the human element of this technology and how it's going to be used, how the buttons are going to be clicked, how the process is going to kind of ping pong from person to person. And so, going back to that idea of leading through technology, it's really important to think about change management through a human lens, right? How is this technology going to be used to drive value? And the conversation always needs to be about value, and adding to the experience of working in this company. And so, um, for example, going back to the Slack conversation, if a company is picking a digital corporate communications platform, the idea is always great, right? It's to connect people, to give people an opportunity to have informal interactions and conversations. But if everyone except for the executive leadership team is using this tool, it creates this kind of rift, right? Where formal communications come out a different way than these kind of casual conversations, and it creates an opportunity for disconnect messaging. And so companies really need to make sure they're consistent in their use of this technology, and even the executives are leading by example to show that these tools are part of the culture of the organization.
Communication is a huge factor when it comes to leadership, right? I mean, it's probably, I often say, out of kind of the 8 competencies or skills that I talk about that are most important in leadership, you've got 1A, which is emotional intelligence, but 1B is communication. And you got to be really good at 1A to be really good at 1B. But how how do where do you recommend? Let's just talk about that from a leadership perspective. Where do many leaders kind of miss that communication flow when they're making um, changes or selecting a new HRIS system, for example, or something like that? How do you suggest, executive leaders do a better job of communicating with and to and through that front line that actually are going to be the end users of it anyway?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that question because in my book, Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption, I have a kind of a core leadership philosophy that's built out of 3 pillars, and that is trust, transparent communication, and accountability. And all of that is wrapped in kind of an air of servant leadership. that I'm sure we can talk about in a little bit. But communication is incredibly important. And one of the pitfalls that I see quite often when I talk with clients is um, no one has the time, right? Everyone is too busy to help themselves. And so they think that hiring a highly qualified individual instead of someone who is still learning and developing in the role, they can bring someone in. They don't need to communicate because they've already done this before. They know what needs to be done. Um, and even if someone has a wealth of experience, it doesn't replace that communication. I think it's incredibly important for leaders to explicitly lay out expectations, right? What does success look like for this organization, for this function, for this team, for your role, whatever that might be? What does success look like? And then we can base feedback both directions, from the leader to the employee and vice versa, based around that definition of success. And so communication needs to be really intentional and really transparent to make sure that everyone's on the same page and marching in the same direction. No
Mm,
matter if we're talking about, uh, a very small assignment or an HRIS implementation,
yeah,
to bring it back to your question.
that's good. So you mentioned the term high performance teams earlier. What's your definition of high performance team, and how does that vary from an average team, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one that I don't necessarily have written down on paper, but I think um, I think that uh, you can you can almost get there easily by thinking about what a dysfunctional team looks like, right? There's a lot of spinning of wheels, right? Of people not necessarily rowing in the same direction, and they're working potentially against each other. There might be a lot of fighting. Um, there might be missed deadlines. There might be um, missed corporate goals, and so flipping that on its head, thinking about what makes a good team is an organization that trusts each other that they're each working on the best interest of the company, that they're doing what they need to do for the company to be successful.
Mm.
They're communicating effectively and efficiently so that people are working on the right things at the right time, and people are accountable, right? They know what they're responsible for. They have ownership to accomplish those things, and they know when these things need to be done.
Mm, that's good. So, you in your book, you mentioned the three pillars, but you mentioned servant leader, no, accountability, but they're all wrapped around servant leadership, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
I'll let you talk more about that in a minute. But servant leadership's something that's thrown around a lot. It's been around a long time. How do you define that? Why is that so important? And how does your book help someone understand more about the topic of servant leadership?
Yeah. And you're absolutely right that servant leadership has been around for a long time. The term was coined by Robert Greenleaf back in the 1970s, right when computers were in their infancy. So
Yeah.
it's quite an old topic. Um, but I think it's actually even more important today than it was back in the 1970s. And I think it really has to do with technology and making sure that people have the right tools. And so um, I think in today's world that a leader's job is really to help make sure their team has the tools that they need to be successful, right? So thinking about trust, communication, and accountability, and assuming those are there, there are so many tools out there these days that are very affordable and very accessible that can improve the efficiencies and performance of individual employees, no matter what aspect of the role or of the company we're talking about, right? If we're talking about HR or sales, um, or accounting, right? There's technology out there that that can really do amazing things. And um, a lot of people think change is good, but change is inherently hard. People like doing it their way. They like it. They like doing things the way they've been doing them, and maybe working on uh, accounting on a paper general ledger isn't quite as fast as using an Excel spreadsheet, but now even more so, right? There's predictive AI tools that can whip together your general ledger in a fraction of a time that you could do it manually in Excel, and for a fraction of the price.
Mm.
So anywhere you turn, there's really fantastic technology that can support your organization. And I think it's a leader's job to really help make sure the team understands the value of that technology.
Mm. You see me smiling. You just made me think. I'm a technology guy. I love to use technology. Um, but I'm a workout guy, so I go to the gym, and I recently went back to my general ledger, like writing my workouts down on page. I carry a notebook with me and write my workouts down. But I was laughing because the reason I did that, Mike, is I had like three different apps that I was paying for on my phone, right, for my workouts. And the problem with having three different apps is all the information's not in one place, right?
Mhm.
It's because they don't talk to each other, and I got a watch that records, my workouts and stuff like that. And so these apps weren't talking to each other. So I said, the way to solve this is go back to the old fashioned day. I'm just going to get I'm going to go back. And I'm not sure I like that either, right? Because I like having my phone. I do my set, I punch it in, I can look back pretty quickly and see it all there. So anyway, I'm in that conundrum of, do I use technology or do I go back to the old way of things?
Yeah.
Your book titled Digital Disruption, and I want to have you talk about what you mean by disruption, because I think back, we've been in this digital age for a long time, right? It's funny, you and I are probably the same age. I remember the first time I saw the internet, man. It's like 1993. I was in the Army, and this guy that in our IT department, I worked at a hospital when I was in the Army, and he's like, man, you can surf the internet and you can see things all over the world. And I thought that was so cool. Right now, it's
Yeah.
just part of everyday business. And then we got to Y2K, right? And the world was going to shut down, and that was kind of disruption. And now we've got AI, which is the new, disruption. But what do you mean by disruption, and then leading through that? And what do leaders and our listeners need to understand about leading through that today?
Yeah. The title is really specific around disruption, meaning the world is changing. The world is changing specifically because of these digital assets and technology. We as a human race are operating differently because of technology than we ever have. On top of that, we have new technological tools that are making some jobs obsolete,
Mm.
which isn't necessarily new, right? In the kind of the machine age, we had a lot of machines come and replace jobs that were very manual. But it's been a while since we've had some disruption quite this big. And so um, with some jobs becoming obsolete, I think there's also going to be new jobs that we can't even really imagine right now coming out of this. We have some companies uh, being made kind of irrelevant and getting replaced by new apps or new technologies. And so it's really just meaning the world is changing at a very rapid pace. And I think it's important that we as companies, thinking through the lens of being a high performing team, that we embrace this technology rather than reject it and say, well, I'm not gonna use AI. It's not the same as doing it myself. While they do have a point and it's true, I think that technology in concert with this human touch can really make it better than the sum of both parts individually.
Mm. Yeah, I love AI. You and I obviously see each other. You see my other participant, Mike's note taker, Otter AI,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
It's a transcription tool. So anytime I'm recording a podcast or having a meeting with someone, my transcription, for lack of a better term, my secretary, right, is on the call with me,
yeah,
dictating our conversation, so I can take that outer AI transcription and create show notes out of it, create a summary of it. Whatever I want to do, find the high points, pull a quote, we can share. So, yeah, there's great advantages to AI. I'll be honest, it took me a little while to kind of like embrace it, but now I use AI every single day for different things in my business, just as a creative partner, right? Like
Yeah.
I need to do this, help me get out of my own way, think about it like this, give me a new idea, give me a quote that I can use. How are you seeing companies like, and again, I'm a small company similar to yours. How are you seeing like bigger companies embrace technology and especially AI to help them be more successful and high performing today?
Yeah, I think the examples that you used are exactly what I've seen from some clients that are more kind of bleeding edge. Note takers are excellent. There's a lot of calendaring tools that are available that can help just take away the administrative burden of going back and forth trying to schedule a meeting, all the way to much more advanced cases where companies can actually work with OpenAI to spin up a kind of an instance of ChatGPT that's specific for their organization. There are a lot of sales organizations that use chatbots as a way to take demand off of their help desk. Right, when you go to Amazon and you have a problem with one of your orders, you chat with a chatbot, right? Not a real human. But there's ways to implement um, ideas like that for an organization, thinking about a company handbook for employees. Oftentimes these documents are 100+ pages. Rather than making employees read through them, they can chat with this chatbot. Hey, is this okay? Or what do you think about this? Right? The chatbot can index the employee handbook and spit out a quick answer and tell them exactly where in the handbook they need to look if they want to get more information.
Mm.
So there's all sorts of really cool applications for different companies.
Yeah, love that. Love that chatbot idea. I hadn't even thought about that, but I love my Calendly, right? I mean,
Calendly, yeah,
you and I scheduled through a calendar or app, right? I can't tell you how much time I've saved using an app like that. Where used to you go back, oh, that time won't work. Here, give me three more times. And you're back and forth and 10 different emails trying to find the exact time somebody can meet. And now I just, I send you my link and you figure it out what works for you. And then we show up together like we did today, right? That
yeah,
um
yeah. And I have clients that they have Outlook in their organization, right? And Outlook, of course, does email, but it also does a lot more. It does task management, does calendaring, and within their organization, we have full departments that aren't using their calendar in Outlook. So if someone wants to schedule a meeting with them, they have to send an email back and forth. Sometimes they're scheduling these meetings with 15 people that can take something like 40 communications back and forth that could very easily be done in less than 30 seconds if people just use their calendar and Outlook, and you can
yeah.
see very quickly, click a button, next available appointment with all attendees, boom, done.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the technology has been there for years, right? Like the Outlook calendar or Google Calendar or whatever
Yeah.
he's working on. So, um, what separates organizations from merely surviving digital disruption to really kind of harnessing it and driving growth with that?
Yeah. I think the answer relates a little bit to what I said earlier about change. I have um, conversations with leaders and members of teams where I hear uh, far too many times when I ask, why do you do it this way? Just curious, as an outside perspective, help me understand the value of doing it this way. And I get the answer that this is the way we've always done it.
Mm,
And so there's no real thought behind it. It's just this was how they were trained 8 years ago when they started at the company, and this is still how they do it today. And so what really makes a company thrive is an organization that has a culture of innovation, that has a culture of continuous learning, and a culture of feedback, right? Learning from each other. I have a lot of organizations that I talk to where they don't feel comfortable giving feedback because they don't want to kind of hurt someone's feelings or don't want to make people feel like they need to change what they're doing. Um, but if you have a culture of continuous learning, right? No one is the an absolutely perfect. No one knows everything, but we can all learn from each other and continue to do better. And in this age of digital disruption, I think adapting and leading through technology can really, really make that difference of you being the successful one compared to your competitor that might have started 6 years later, but they're embracing AI to help with that kind of skyrocketing trajectory.
That's good. I call that twatty disease, Mike. Twatty, the way
Twatty.
we have always done it. You know, T W uh, TWWADI, the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Twatty disease. We got to fight that as organizations. Like the majority of my business is done in the healthcare space. And the interesting thing about healthcare is they're in a constant state of change, but they're always trying to fight to stay the same. And you know it's constantly I'm talking to them. We got to fight twatty disease. You got twatty disease. We got to get you we got to get an inoculation for that, right? And so I mean that's so important. And today, one of my quotes that I love, and I'm gonna probably mess it up here in just a minute, but um, the learner will inherit an earth. The learned will inherit an earth that no longer exists. By Eric Hoffer, he said, the learned will inherit an earth that no longer exists, while the learner will find themselves beautifully equipped for what comes, or something like that. It's something to that effect. It's just a reminder to always stay in this growth and learning mindset. And that's where we're at today. I mean, technology, the speed of change, and maybe you know the stats for this, but the speed of change is 100 times faster today than it was just 10 years ago, right? I mean, the rate of information that comes in, I don't know what it is. You might know more about that, but yeah, we got to stay on that cutting edge of change. I want to
Yeah.
I want to anything you want to add to that before we jump to another topic?
Yeah. I was just going to say, Moore's law has been around for quite a while, at least since the late 1900s. I don't know exactly what year, but it says essentially the capability of technology will double every 10 years. So there is an exponential curve. So thinking about the rate of technological advancement in 1960s is now in a huge, like 7 orders of magnitude less than the rate of change today. So we're in a rocket ship, going incredibly fast right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun and scary all at the same time, right? It's depending on, what day it is for me sometimes.
Yeah.
What during COVID kind of challenged all of us in some industries, especially healthcare was a little bit different, especially the hospital environment too. Forced us into this kind of work from home, remote work, hybrid work. Over the last couple of years, we've kind of moved back more to come to the office. It's more kind of hybrid than it is work from home. But what are you seeing? How can leaders kind of maintain a level of leadership and expectations and accountability while also allowing for that flexibility in these hybrid approaches?
Yeah, I think during COVID, uh, it forced people's hands to work remotely, and it showed us as a world that working remotely is okay. And we went through a very successful couple of years working remotely as both a nation in the U.S. and across the globe. But the difficult part is that working in a hybrid or a remote team is hard, and it is harder than working when everyone's in the office, right? You can't just peek over your cubicle and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" Or, "Hey, do you want to go to lunch with me?" Or, "I'm ordering pizza and let's go hang out in the break room." Um, but I think there are very accessible tools that we can use to make this better. And so going back to the book, Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption, um, there's these core pillars of trust, transparent communication, and accountability. And um, what oftentimes people think of accountability is not quite how I define it. So they think, this company doesn't have any accountability. Mike failed in this project and he didn't get fired. We really need accountability. We really need to fire people when they mess up. But that's not really what high performing accountability looks like. High performing accountability is making sure that we transparently communicate across the organization what our expectations are, who does what within the organization, who's responsible for what in a specific project, and what needs to be accomplished by when. So we have very clear, concrete milestones that need to be achieved by a certain date. And then we build trust throughout the organization over time to make sure that we have mutual belief that everyone is operating in the best interest of the company.
Mm.
And when this environment is present in an organization, employees naturally want to achieve, right? They want success for the organization. They want to knock it out of the park with a home run, but oftentimes they just don't know how.
Yeah, that's good. So I love the idea of hybrid work. Most of my team, well, all of my team except one now is in the office with me, and that's because it's my wife. We live together, but we home office. And then, everybody else is remote somewhere, so all of our meetings are virtual, either through Zoom or phone calls. Um, and I've been working from home. So I started my own business in 2006. I probably officed the first 8 or 10 years ago. I don't know how long I bet I've been working from home for at least 10 years now. Highly productive. I'm highly disciplined, right? I mean, as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you better be, or you're gonna fail, right? But highly disciplined. How do you? What's your advice for leaders that to create that kind of the routine, the discipline without over micromanaging? Because I think, look, you can be a good leader in the office. I'm probably a better leader with my remote staff because I'm probably more clear in my communication about timelines and what, because I can't stand over, I can't check in, all those kind of things, right? But what's your advice to leaders about, creating expectations, alignment, accountability versus kind of micromanaging that from a in a hybrid type of role?
Yeah, it can certainly be a slippery slope. And I think that, it's really important when you build this accountability to not be kind of constantly checking in, right? Well, what's the progress? What's the progress? What's the progress?
Hmm.
If leaders are invested up front in the conversation, setting those clear expectations and being very clear about what success looks like, you then need to kind of let go, right? Take your hands off, take the training wheels off, let people ride, and you can set regular check-ins, cadences to review progress. But people need to work on their own, and you can have this kind of communication cycle of setting expectations, letting people off on their own for a set amount of time, review the work product, and then give feedback again. And this cyclical process of giving feedback and getting feedback will start to get easier and easier and easier. And you'll realize that in the second, third, fourth round of feedback that, typically if something is missed, it's, well, shoot, I forgot to actually say that up front. And so as you get better at this process, you'll realize what specifically needs to be messaged to employees up front for them not to need to be micromanaged. A lot of people feel like they need to micromanage, otherwise their team will fail.
Hmm.
But I don't believe that's true. I think it's really important that those expectations are set very clearly up front, and often they're not. People just
Yeah.
kind of assume that they're a mind reader. They have experience. They know what to do,
Mm.
and we're not mind readers.
Yeah. I love that point you brought up about experience. I've seen companies hire people that have experience. Well, they've done that before, but and I always say, yeah, but they haven't done it here. I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent, Mike, and I talk about the activation period. Most companies call it onboarding. I call it activating the best
Mm.
in our people, right? And that first 90 days is critical, even with an experienced person, right? Because they haven't done it here. We don't really know how they did it over there. We asked them a few questions in the interview. We hope they were telling us the truth, but our culture's different. My expectations are different. And, the way you build trust is to spend those first 90 days building trust through communication and loop closure and all those things you've kind of mentioned. So I think that's fantastic. Mike, we could probably talk for another hour and not cover everything we wanted to cover, but I appreciate you being a great guest here today. Tell the listeners where they can learn more about you and get a copy of your book, and what's one reason they should get a copy of the book before we wrap up today.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to any of your listeners that want to have a deep dive conversation about any of this. My website is apexconsulting.partners. There's no .com or anything else. It's just apexconsulting.partners. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And you can find my book on Amazon or wherever books are sold starting April 8th. And I think they should buy this book because it's really the first book of its kind in the modern age. It's the first book that really blends the concept of HR and IT together to really unlock true potential in performance.
Yeah, love that. Appreciate you writing the book, number one, Mike. Can't wait to get a copy of it. And we'll make sure that we add Mike's links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, whether you're on YouTube or on any of your podcast sites, just check out the show notes. Mike's links, website links, LinkedIn links will be in the show notes as well. Mike, good luck with the book. Hope you have a lot of success in selling the book and spreading your ideas across the globe, man. It's highly needed today. Thanks for being a great guest today.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks for having me.